Wonderful. Good afternoon, folks. How are we doing? Good. Okay, let's try that one more time. Good afternoon, folks. How are we doing? Yeah. My name is Jenny Lay-Flurrie. I have the privilege and honor of being Microsoft's Chief Accessibility Officer. I'm very proud to welcome you to this. Thank you for picking this session out of many that you get to pick. You've got two of us here co-presenting, so Natasha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Crampton. I'm Microsoft's Chief Responsible AI Officer. And again, it's a thrill to be here with my friend and long-term collaborator, Jenny Lay-Flurrie, to really share some insights from our work together at Microsoft and to invite you to take advantage of this collective opportunity that we really have to build a more inclusive AI future together. The work that we've been doing across the company is really built upon this fundamental proposition that accessible AI is responsible AI. You know, our company's mission is that we want to empower every person and every organization on the planet, and it's simply not possible to do that without building inclusive technology from the very beginning. So to put it very directly, Jenny and I don't consider accessible AI and responsible AI to be parallel priorities on separate tracks. We actually believe that they are deeply interconnected imperatives. Our work together on these issues has really spanned several waves of AI innovation, starting with traditional AI and machine learning systems when we are looking at things like pattern recognition and classification systems, to, of course, the generative AI era that ChatGPT welcomed in lots of ways, where we saw new types of interactions, conversational interactions with AI systems for the first time in a really material way. And there was a lot of creativity that came with that as well. And of course, it wouldn't be Ignite without mentioning the AI agent era, or the agentic era, where we now have not just systems that are responding, but systems that are taking action as well. We haven't done this work just in the abstract together. We've done it in the context of Microsoft's products. So when we think about, for example, traditional AI and machine learning systems, back then we were doing quite a bit of work on facial recognition together. We had to confront the reality that our AI systems were not working well across all demographic groups, and we needed to make sure that we had systems in place to fix that. In doing that work, we really learned a lot about understanding our users of our AI systems really deeply, and also thinking about different use cases. So using facial recognition to secure your phone is a use case that has different opportunities and risks as compared with empowering a blind person or someone who is of low vision with an app that helps them understand what is happening in the environment much more broadly. In the generative AI era, we've been focused on building co-pilots across the company, really using the power of that generative technology to generate new content in lots of different dimensions. For our work to build trust in that technology, it's been really, really important to think about how we are representing people in text and in images and in videos. And we'll share a few stories about how we have worked on that shortly. In the agentic era, because these systems are not just responding but acting, you've got to think much more deeply about the control plane that you need in order to do that well. And so I hope that some of you have been able to enjoy some of the new announcements that we've made this morning in the keynote session about the Agent 365 and Foundry control plane, which is some of the systems that we've developed to help make sure that we're meeting the moment of this AI era. But the thing about the work that we do across the company is that we're not a company that just builds technology for technology's sake. We are building technology to empower people. So I want to turn to Jenny now for a moment to help bring these eras of AI innovation, these waves of AI innovation to life with some really people-centered stories about the difference that we've made.
And so if we wallow a little bit in these three categories, and we start with traditional AI and ML, as we know, AI isn't new, and neither is this marriage between responsible AI and accessible AI. In fact, the first app that Microsoft ever produced, AI app, was Seeing AI. How many of you have used it? All right, so first bit of homework, pull out your Apple Fruity robot, I don't care, and download it. It's a free app that is for blind and low vision that uses AI and machine learning to understand the world. It was designed by a blind developer from the UK who wanted to be able to interpret the world around him, be able to walk into a coffee shop and understand if there was an empty chair, to walk into a meeting room and understand if people were happy or it was a really tough meeting. It was one of those, and he was just walking into that. So it has lots of different channels that you can leverage. This app came out in 2017. In the middle is imagery. How do we work with imagery? One of the most beautiful parts of generative AI in 2022 coming out was that you could garner an enormous amount of data. A lot of that data comes from websites and from published LLMs. Here's the kicker, though. A lot of those LLMs, only up to 4% of the world's websites are actually accessible to screen reader users and people who use assistive technology. That means that they have the right navigational code in them to be able to get through the page. Those websites also contain a lot of the imagery that is used in society that is sadly and poorly incorrect when it comes to its representation of disability. So you have to balance that and mitigate the data behind it. And on the right is an incredible guy called Brian Jensen, who helped us to really understand the power of this chapter that we're in. He has ALS or MND. He relies on speech synthesis to communicate and eye gaze. And what we were able to do using this chapter was really power him, leveraging recordings of his previous voice before he developed the disease to create his own custom neural voice. But while that gave him and his family the most emotional reaction I've ever seen, and it was a privilege to be in the room to see that happen, on the other side, we need to make sure that the security of that voice doesn't power the next wave of robocalls, and his voice isn't used for sort of the wrong purposes as we go forward. 3 examples, and we're going to dig into a lot more as we wallow a little bit in the architecture that goes beneath these and the controls that we put behind them. Natasha.
Thanks, Jenny. So the power of those use cases is really what motivates the deep work that we need to do when we're assessing a new generation of technology and building in inclusive design patterns and controls from the very beginning. So just to zero in on agents to begin with, there's a real spectrum of agents, and this would have been apparent from all of your engagements today and beyond at Ignite. Now, at the one end, for a very simple agent, you can think about this type of system being, for example, a retrieval agent, where you're pointing an agent at a bunch of different documents and then asking that agent to interrogate those documents and return answers to a user. That's quite a simple agent in the scheme of things. You can then think more in the middle of the spectrum at, for example, a task-based agent that is sort of automating a very repetitive task. When we think about both the transformative business potential of agents and also the inclusion opportunity, the place where we think most of that value will come is in this autonomous agent category. Now, for autonomous agents, we're talking about agents, AI systems that will take action. And they have these 3 important characteristics. They're proactive, they're independent, and they're adaptive. So let me explain what I mean by all of that. So first of all, with proactive, an autonomous agent is often going to act on signals from its environment. It's not necessarily going to be prompted by a human user. Independence here is the idea that an agent will be taking steps, sometimes in the background, always with human oversight and control, but it's not going to be guided by a human every step of the way, because that's actually part of the value if we can get the control measures right. Autonomous agents are also adaptive. What this means here is that most of today's autonomous agents are powered by large language models, which are not deterministic. What I mean by that is you can offer up the same prompt to a large language model and not necessarily get the same answer. Now, that matters a lot when you're thinking about observability, control, and oversight of an agent. So these are really important characteristics to get your head around from the very beginning, because they really set the path for how you want to build systems with the right controls from the very beginning to engender that trust of the people who are using these systems. So when we're doing our work across the company and we encounter a whole new wave of innovation, as is promised by the Agentic wave, we really have to step back and ask ourselves some pretty fundamental questions. And these, displayed on the slide now, are some of the questions that we ask ourselves. We do think it is really important to start with a clear vision of what are the opportunities we seek to secure. I roll up my sleeves every day. I know Jenny rolls up her sleeves every day to do this work across the company because I genuinely believe in the beneficial promise of this technology. But the benefits don't just come by themselves. You have to shape the technology in a way that realizes those benefits. So we always want to be very clear and articulate about what the benefits are that we're seeking to secure. But we can't be naive about the risks as well. We need to be clear-eyed about the risks. And so as we work through waves of technology, we bring together our experts across the company and outside of the company as well to really help us understand what those surfaces might look like. Now, these experts are not just technical people. They are people with social sciences expertise. They're people with lived experiences. And this is critically important to making sure that we shape this technology in a way that truly does serve people. So when we did this exercise in the case of autonomous agentic systems, these are some of the categories of risks that we thought were important to highlight. And when I think about these categories, to my mind, they fall into two buckets. All AI systems can be both tools and weapons. We've got to make sure as tools, they function as we design them to do. And so making sure that we have explainability, that we can understand the steps that the agent took and why they took them, that we have human oversight, that we have transparency, not just transparency for the developers of the agentic AI systems, but the people who are exposed to them. It's important to know whether you're dealing with a human or an agent, and this is the type of work that we do under this transparency pillar. Task adherence, this is really the question of, is the agent doing what the agent ought to do, and are all the intermediate steps sensible steps in taking that particular course? So I think about that whole top row of risks, explainability, human oversight, transparency, and task adherence, as really about focusing on making agentic systems as a tool do the things that we want them to do in a way that builds trust with humans. But like any system, agentic systems can be misused as well. They can be used as weapons. And so we have to proactively identify those risks and stay ahead of them with mitigations. So the bottom row on this slide, which mentions harmful requests, prompt injections, memory poisoning, and data exfiltration, are some of the misuse scenarios that we can foresee as being particularly impactful for autonomous agentic AI systems. Now, the good news here is that these are risks, yes, and we must be clear-eyed about them, but they are not without mitigations. I really encourage all of those who are interested in really delving in and building these types of systems to attend many of the breakout sessions that are focused on both Agent 365 and Foundry control plane, because these represent our big tooling and evaluation investments across the company to help you mitigate these types of risks out of the box so that you can have confidence in the systems that you're building. But in addition to the agent-specific tools and governance platforms that we've built, I do want to call out that we have a range of general-purpose responsible AI sets of tooling that you can put to work in exactly this type of context as well. So the one that I thought would be fun to highlight here today is Pirate. This is our Python risk identification tool. It's the open framework that has been battle tested by Microsoft's AI red team. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the concept of red teaming. It has its roots in security. The idea is that you test the system to push up against the outer limits of it. This then helps you harden the system prior to release. Now, with Pirate, we have both built in test cases that expand the sort of traditional security-related risks of AI systems, but we have also built capability within that team and within this tool to make sure that we are addressing inclusion-related risks as well. So when, for example, we were launching Seeing AI, a new version of it, our red team was involved working closely with the blind community at Microsoft to red team that app using this tool called Pirate. And equally, when Microsoft built our own vision model in the 𝗲 family, we made sure that we were actually using data sets in our red teaming that were designed to uncover the risks of ableism. So with that primer on some of the tooling and processes by which we do our responsible AI and accessible AI work within Microsoft, I'm going to turn it back to Jenny, who's going to ground us in the people that we seek to serve in doing so.
Thanks, Natasha. And we're going to nerd out. We're going to go through some new features that are just launching today that have been built carefully, thoughtfully, using some of these principles and tools and systems. But first, I'm going to take you back and just breathe in a couple of fundamentals that are so important to building for humans. My role is really focused on the world of disability. 1.3 billion people around the world, 83% of you will experience disability in your lifetime. Sorry, it's coming if you haven't had it yet. Most of it, 75%, is non-apparent. But here's the kicker. Most people with disabilities are also innovators because we need to. It's incredibly important for us to be making the world easier that hasn't been designed for us. Whether you are deaf, blind, mental health, neurodiversity, whatever it may be. In fact, some of the world's inventions, some of the best inventions, have come from designing with and for disability. My favorite in this is the one that's just on the screen right now, is the electric toothbrush. Who knew that? Anyone know that one? Designed for limited mobility. The whole theory was a Swedish doctor who understood that actually using a motor in a toothbrush would make it much easier for those with arthritis and limited mobility. How right was he? Also right for the world. And that is why we invest in accessibility. Now, the good news is that we have a very strong community, and we work with communities, of course, around the world. All of them first-line adopters of accessible technology and technology in general, and the first to play with new technologies like Seeing AI as we enter this new era. And then there's my day job. My day job is managing Microsoft's portfolio of products, tools, systems, buildings, and partnering across every company that we work with and own to build accessible design technology. That means that I work with folks in Windows and Xbox, and I see my colleagues in the front from GitHub and LinkedIn, over 6,000 different products, 550 buildings, a few events like this that have a couple of people going to lunch at the same time, making sure that we are accessible and thoughtful about bringing those in. For the last 10 years, I've been doing this job. And 50% of what we do is fix bugs that are created in design and build. That is the majority of accessibility. And that is, honestly, been our bread and butter for a decade. But we are at an absolute screeching crux point, where the methodologies that we've had for the last decade do not scale to the era of AI. Why is that? We've got increasing regulation. For those that haven't heard, the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, is now in force if you are selling into Europe. That means that any product that's covered by the EAA must be accessible. They will be enforcing against that. We have customers. And this is not our lawsuits, by the way. This is customers who are desperate and dying to use websites, products that you produce and are unable to. You're losing out on revenue because of that. And then the sheer pace of business. When I first joined the company, we were producing Windows every 5 to 7 years. That's not the case anymore. And we are all working in weeks as opposed to years at this point. So how do we harness this and really think about building accessible technology that is also accessible AI? We have to go deeper. The first thing we've really had to do is invest in the data. And there's 3 examples on this screen. One is investing in speech. In fact, this was a partnership with 5 of my technology peers, Google, Apple, Amazon, Meta. Have I got them all? Was that 5? Is anybody counting? Maybe not. That was 4. Microsoft is 5. I did get it. And it was a tough one to pull off. But what that's meant is that through the University of Illinois, we've been pulling in speech samples from people with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, impacted speech, that has overall improved the speech recognition of Azure by between 18 and 60%, depending on the speech. Not just for disabled voice, but for every voice. We've also acquired 21 million minutes of multimodal data from a company called 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗍𝗻𝗻. 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗍 is not Microsoft. It's an incredible app that blind and low vision use to understand and interpret the world around them. It leverages generative AI. It was actually the launch partner with OpenAI for GPT-4. And you can take an image or a picture, a video, and it will describe that for you. We actually have this plugged into my technical support team, and blind people are able to get answers to their technical questions and solve them without speaking to a human 60% of the time. They've also been able to gather a lot of imagery of blind people, dogs, and technology like Braille that is improving data and the foundations of LLMs. And then there's customer zero. How do we make it quicker, easier for us as IT pros, as CIOs, to make sure that we are building accessible by design? So, some examples. First, this is one that is a little bit nerdy and is a little bit of my day job. This is an internal tool that we built to produce conformance reports for customers. Conformance reports is what you look for from Microsoft. You want to know if product X is accessible, is conformant, is compliant. The actual regulatory requirement here is that we do an annual update of this. Annual doesn't match the pace of technology, so we wanted to see if we could improve it. It also was built when our inventory was slightly less than 6,000, so we wanted to see if we could add a Copilot. We got that in there, and what it did was it took our engineering time, the amount of time it took for our engineers to write that report, it took that down by up to 12 to 18 hours each time. And it's meant that we can produce conformance reports for our customers on a monthly basis, not a yearly basis. And it's simple things that are really important as part of this. The Microsoft Accessibility Standard, which, by the way, is just our internal way of making it simple for my engineers, which contains all of the global regulatory in one simple document for them. We ask them to select which area of that, and then Copilot will rewrite that conformance statement to be accurate to the code and publish it immediately on verification. Second, data. I mentioned this earlier, and I'll give you a quick story. There is an amazing person called 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗶𝗸𝗀𝗁 who lives in Dublin. She is a little person. She has her own company called Tilting the Lens, and she's also been on the front cover of Vogue. She is incredibly impactful in the fashion industry. She put a prompt into Bing. She put a prompt in saying, please create me a fun image, because we were all doing that in 2023, of a person who is a little person, white, female, working, and make them with a nice, cool leather jacket and some fancy shoes. Gucci was involved. The image she got back in 2023 was of a Christmas elf packaging toys. We tried it over and over and over, and with the same result. And unfortunately, we found that to be the case across many dimensions of disability. We then partnered with Little Persons of America. We partnered with many organizations to acquire data with the right guardrails, with the right systems and controls to make sure that the next time she produces an image, that it brings back an authentic and representative image. And on the left is what she got last month. This is live and in place for little people, persons with amputation or limb difference, blind, low vision, autism, Down syndrome, and more is on the way. It's also about leveraging that data to improve our speech recognition and the voices that Microsoft provides. These are two that are launching today in Insiders. The first one is new natural voices, HD natural voices, in our inbuilt screen reader in Windows. Screen readers are leveraged by blind and low vision people all around the world to read what is on the screen. And I'm going to play you a before and an after.
Current experience.
Modern AI voice generators use neural text-to-speech, NTTS, systems powered by deep learning. These models are trained on massive datasets of human speech and learn to replicate pitch and tone, rhythm, and pacing.
New experience. Natural HD voices.
Modern AI voice generators use neural text-to-speech, NTTS, systems powered by deep learning. These models are trained on massive datasets of human speech and learn to replicate pitch and tone, rhythm and pacing, natural pauses and emphasis.
Hear the difference? You can clap. It's okay. I'll take it. And credit to the Windows Narrator team who have been working and powering this through with communities of blind people to make sure that the efficacy of that speech actually drives productivity. But it's not just speech out. It's also how you generate speech in. The next video is from a girl on my team, an incredible leader on my team who runs inclusive design at Microsoft. She lives in Florida. Her name is Christina Mallon, and she has ALS, which has paralyzed her arms. And she leverages a lot of dictation technology. And this is fluid dictation.
Let me check to make sure fluid dictation is turned on. Okay, great. Voice access, wake up. My name is Christina Mallon, and I lead inclusive design at Microsoft. I have ADHD, and I cannot move my arms due to ALS. Technology was not built with users with these disabilities in mind. For example, voice dictation was built to mirror directly what a user says. I have trouble organizing my thoughts and I struggle with grammar, so I must edit what I dictate on the page using a foot mouse that clicks one letter at a time on this on-screen keyboard that you see to the right. I asked myself, how can I leverage AI to move faster? How do I challenge the status quo? The answer was the hackathon. I joined a hackathon team willing to work on this challenge. And out of that hack came fluid dictation. This allows me to forgo the step of having to check the grammar, as fluid dictation does it automatically. Join me in saying goodbye to the keyboard.
You can see that the grammar, as that is inputted in, there's no going back to fix commas and sentences. It's picked the right tenses of words and the right context-appropriate inputs. This is life-changing for Christina. But it's also about how do we shift left? Shift left to make it secure by design, privacy by design, accessible by design. I mentioned earlier that 50% of bugs come from design. So how do we fix that? We launched an accessibility assistant that is in Figma. It is live, it has been out for a couple of months, and I want to give you a quick sense of how this works. Copilot for Figma. You can very quickly and easily, as you are building your design, create the right structures to be making sure that you have the right structure that enables headings and navigation. It's tackling some of the key common top 10 bugs that I will tell you dominate the main drivers of accessibility and non-accessibility in every product and tool that we have. This is free and available. And the same thought is being applied to alternative text. Who has used alternative text? Alternative text, some of you, all of you now, are alternative text experts, or you will be by the time you leave this room. Every image that you put in, whether it's in a document, an email, a piece of code, a website, has to have alternative text behind it. If it doesn't, as a screen reader is going through that page, it will skip or just say blank. As the density of imagery exists in our technology, it's incumbent that we make sure that there are descriptions behind it. This is in the top 3 reasons why code can be inaccessible. How can AI help with that? By making sure that we have the right, accurate alternative text automatically provided that you can verify. Now, it sounds easy. We all know what the power is of generative AI right now. But now think about this from a blind person's point of view. How much detail do you put in? Do you go into excruciating level of depth on each shred of fiber of what is in a picture? What is the right level, the right altitude, the right pertinent information that a person can and does have to have? This is the data that we've been working on. In the middle of the screen is a simple image of a gang of folks, who are actually the folks who built this feature, standing in an office environment. And the alternative text does a very quick analysis of that and comes back with an accurate description of it. This image depicts a group of people, and it has 4 lines at most. You can turn these features on by default. You can have this to approve alternative text. And if you're new to alt text, I encourage you to go the step further, which is also making sure that you have Accessibility Assistant across M365 turned on by default. It will guide you in how to write anything in that environment by design. And lastly, I just want to talk about accessible code. Accessible code suggestions is really, I would say, our North Star. We are desperate to make sure that we build carefully, thoughtfully, by design in everything that we build and we write. And I'm really proud that we have some incredible tools, as is called accessibleinsights.io, that goes in and really methodically goes in, and you can check your code very quickly and easily. It will identify 40% of the top errors, and you can leverage Copilot to actually check the accuracy and the fidelity of that code and make suggestions and train you while you are writing it. And in GitHub, Ed Summers, who is in the audience, launched a feature called Accessibility Scanner. It's not Scammer, that would be bad. Scanner in GitHub Copilot, which is built on top of GitHub's Actions and GitHub Copilot. They announced it at an event just in October. It's installed onto your repository as a GitHub action workflow. It scans on demand or on schedule, And then it uses DQ AXCore, who just actually completed a session that might be worth, if you're interested, watching the recording of, to find accessibility problems on this is a HTML website, files issues to track them, and ultimately assigns them to GitHub Copilot to fix and files them as you set them. When it's finished, it will summarize what's changed. And by doing that, it's not just found the problems, it's helping you to validate the fixes, and it's training you to not repeat the same error going forward. I'll end with why this matters. I've been standing here all this time. Many of you may not know, though, that I'm profoundly deaf and I do not hear speech. I came to Microsoft actually in 2005 to work on a little product called Hotmail. Has anyone heard of that? Some of you have one. And used a product called Link Communicator. And every time that I joined a call sitting in London, New Zealand, I had to organize and schedule. I had to schedule a cart provider for my captioning and a sign language interpreter for sign. Every time my meeting moved, I had to adjust that 24, 48 hours and tell my colleagues that I couldn't be in that meeting. This is Teams today. Teams, my interpreter is always visible on my screen, and her sign is detected in the same way as you would detect voice. I can add captioning, and I can add a transcript, so I can scroll backwards and forwards. And if I wanted to, I could translate that into French or German. And then at the end, I get meeting notes. So I don't have to sit there and use my cognitive load to understand and lip read, to understand and guess, or to take notes while I'm trying and doing what I call the tennis maneuvers. This is why this matters. This is why we're so grateful that you picked this session, and we're so grateful that you're investing your time in learning some of the journey that we're working on right now and going to be continuing pathing to bring this marriage together of accessible AI and responsible AI. Thank you so much for being here today. We have time for a few questions. If folks have any, please raise your hands. You're very kind. If you have questions, please do use there as a mic in the middle. Please go to that middle because it will be captioned and transcribed, which matters to folks who are listening on the recording who may be joining with disabilities. Any questions? Please don't make me make them up. That would be a bad thing. Thank you, sir. You're very kind.
I have one.
Game on.
Given everything you said today about what you've been working on and figuring out, it's a very unfair question, but what still keeps you up at night?
How long you got?
That's why it's unfair.
I know we both have thoughts here. What keeps me up at night is that we missed the last era. The last era with websites that still hasn't been remediated. We have 96% of the world's websites that blind people or people using assistive technology cannot use. I do not want the AI era to be a repetition of that. So I do feel an incredible amount of urgency to make sure that this era we trap in the right way and we build technology that really goes to tackle the education, employment, and societal bias that exists.
And in the same vein, I would say that, with past general purpose technologies like electricity, for example, we have not done a good job of diffusing that technology around the world so that everybody can take advantage of that technology. So I think the work that we're doing together alongside many colleagues at Microsoft to make sure that our AI systems reflect the language and the culture and the norms of people right around the world is just incredibly important to securing those amazing beneficial use cases that we've seen examples of today, but that won't happen unless we make those types of investments in language, culture, reflecting local values.
Good afternoon. Clearly, Microsoft is using a lot of data to, create a accurate representation for all of these people. How are you managing the governance around that data and ensuring that it's accurate as you move forward?
Sure, I'll jump in. I mean, thank you. That's a great question. And, there's both, I think, the norms and laws in that space that govern how we use data, and we work every day very closely with our colleagues who, for example, specialize in how personal data needs to be protected, how sensitive categories of data need to be protected. But I think it's more than that. Microsoft is not a company that is simply, docking in to follow the laws as they are around the world. But there's some really important practical work that we've been doing to make sure that we're not just relying on manual processes, but we've got actual tools to govern the data that we're using. So, for example, my own team has been partnering with one of our engineering groups very deeply to build a tool that is going to help us manage the vast data sets that we're using for training models in various dimensions, and the types of controls that we're building in are very, very detailed. So ability to track the provenance of the data, ability to assess how representative it is in a bunch of different dimensions. So we're trying to do this in a way that reflects how we do most of our work, which is to be principled, but to actually enact the practice of it through processes and tools that are very concrete.
And I do think in practicum, these principles, systems, and controls have become our just lighthouse to how to best implement it. And we are learning. We're far from perfect. But what that means is that the transparency of where the data is coming from, the collection and the humanizing of that data, recognizing our own bias. We are we're a company that's based in the west of the States. We're not global, but data is. And so making sure that we're leaning into the community that exists around the world. So some of the imagery data, we were working with communities that existed in Africa and beyond to make sure that we had a truly inclusive approach to it. But yeah, open to any other comments on that as we go forward.
Just a quick additional question. That tool that you mentioned that you're developing, is that going to be something that's available as a product later on?
That's a great question. In general, we do try and adopt a philosophy of when we do build tools to do this work internally, we do try and find paths to making them available either on an open source basis or to integrate them into Foundry, our development platform. So I will pass back to the engineering team the enthusiasm for us doing that, because I do think these tools are broadly useful and needed, right, to really make sure we are respecting the rights and conditions that come with the use of this data in the best possible way that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was a thank you in sign language, extra points.
Hi, I hate hearing my own voice. One of your slides mentioned poisoning the well, which is a concern generally, especially for AI is not smart, it just knows what it can see, and if I can put garbage in, it'll send that. But I feel like in this sphere, it's more of a concern because these people in this area already have challenges they're working through. So some of them might be even more susceptible to these types of attacks. So what types of things are you doing? Like some of it would be really obvious, but if it's subtle, it'd be hard to detect. So I'm just wondering what types of things you're trying to implement to combat that.
And you just had the last question. Gentlemen, we will meet you in the back of the room just afterwards. Do you want to?
Sure, it's a great question, and I think the techniques to manage these types of risks are continuing to evolve, but I can give you insight into a couple of ways in which we think about this. So first of all, especially when we are directing an AI system to process certain data sources as part of responding to a user's prompt, then we can set guardrails over special security tokens and the like that those data sets have, so that there's a real exchange, right? And it's clear that this is an authorized data set. Now, we've had some of our security engineers doing some, I think, very interesting and promising work whereby if they're really sort of analyzing the components of a user's prompt, and rather than just processing the prompt as a whole, really thinking about what are the constituent elements and where is it really important that we introduce some deterministic controls about how the system acts, right? So not just processing based on the literal words of the user's prompt, which might actually have some nefarious instructions in there to go to a poisoned data source, for example, but really analyzing the prompts and breaking them down and having hard-coded logic, basically, around certain components where we're just not going to allow the orchestrator of the system to go to a data source unless we know that it is actually an authorized source to begin with. So I think, it's going to be a community effort to continue to understand the different attack patterns, continue to strengthen our mitigations against them, but it's obviously a critical part of building a secure AI system from the beginning.
And I will say, as a closing point, if anyone has any issues, any concerns, particularly about accessibility, do bookmark Disability Answer Desk. If ever we receive a concern that comes in about a sensitive use case, that is a free technical support that is available to any customer, regardless of what company they're in. And we lightly call it DAD. Disability Answer Desk. I have no mum team, but I have a dad team. Please do leverage it. Thank you very much for your time, folks.
Thank you so much.
We will join in the back of the room. Thank you very much.